It's one of the most beautiful places in the nation to live. Hampton Roads is rich with beaches and great places to live along the coast. Not far away, the Outer Banks, a delicate chain of islands that's a summer haven for visitors near and far. It can also be one of the most dangerous during hurricane season. Our part of the world is quickly becoming one of the most vulnerable in the country for bad weather. It doesn't even need to rain to flood, but when it does, it's a lot worse. And we don't even need a direct hit to see the effects of tropical weather. Hurricane season is upon us. You need to be prepared. We're on your side with what you need to know as we spend the summer tracking the tropics.
Hi everyone, I'm Super Doppler 10 Chief Meteorologist Jeff Edmondson. Welcome to Tracking the Tropics. This isn't just about forecasting the 2025 hurricane season. During the next half hour, we'll show you how hurricanes form in the Atlantic. Also, we'll look at previous storms and see how our changing climate is causing change with these tropical systems. And as you know, forecasting isn't an exact science, but we'll show you how we get to those predictions on specific storms and how the beaches we enjoy can be a big issue when storms approach. But we'll start at the beginning. Hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th. Any time during that period is prime time for hurricane formation. Meteorologist Jeremy Wheeler has a look at how hurricanes form and where they might go.
To start off, we need to talk about one of the main ingredients, warm ocean water. Hurricanes love warm ocean water. That's their main fuel source. These warmer temperatures typically occur in the lower latitudes, but between the late summer and early fall, that warm water can stretch farther north. The general threshold for hurricane formation is water temperatures of about 80 degrees Fahrenheit or above. Once you get that, then the process can kick off. So the warm ocean water evaporates on a daily basis. In the warmer zones, the evaporation can be quite strong. This newly formed water vapor then rises up into the atmosphere where it's cooler, and this causes the rising air and vapor to cool down to the dew point. Then you've got condensation occurring. This is when tiny little liquid droplets form, and eventually enough of them form into the clouds. If the wind shear is weak, those are the upper level winds, then the thunderstorms can grow in size and strength. So now we have a cluster of thunderstorms out over the ocean, and they're very common. There's thousands of these all the time over the ocean, especially in the lower latitudes. However, sometimes these clusters can start to grow together and get larger. Once the winds start moving in the same direction, which is counterclockwise, and the pressure drops, then it reaches the first stage. This is a tropical depression. Now it's organized, and at that point, the National Hurricane Center gives it a number. Winds are still weak, less than 39 miles an hour. However, they can produce some heavy rain and flooding. Once the winds reach 39 miles an hour or higher, then it becomes a tropical storm. At that point, it's given a name. In a tropical storm, the thunderstorms are more concentrated around the center. They can produce some damage, but the storm can also produce lots of flooding. Winds can reach over 70 miles an hour. However, once the winds reach 74 miles an hour or greater, then it becomes a hurricane. Now the system is very strong and has an organized structure. We're familiar with the features of a hurricane when you've got that structure. Almost everyone is familiar with the eye of the storm. This is a calmer area that forms in the center of the hurricane. In some cases, you can go out in it, look up, and see blue skies with light winds. Ironically, around that center is the worst of the storm. It's called the eye wall, and this is essentially a ring of strong thunderstorms that connect around the center, and those winds can reach to over 100 miles an hour sustained, and in the stronger cases, over 150 miles an hour. Finally, there's the outer rain bands. These are lines of rain and storms that typically produce squally weather. Those are the basics for how a hurricane forms. I'm meteorologist Jeremy Wheeler.
Thanks, Jeremy. Forecasting hurricanes has come a long way over the decades, but it's still not an exact science. The season has a way of throwing a curveball into our forecasts, as we saw in 2016 with Hurricane Matthew and the widespread flooding in Virginia Beach. Meteorologist Steve Fundero now with the tricks hidden in the forecast.
A weather forecast is a prediction of the future, an estimation of reality. Anytime we try to figure out what's going to happen in our day-to-day life, we're never exactly right. So how do we know where a hurricane will go and what it'll do? In addition to interpreting the atmosphere, let me introduce you to forecast models and the certainty and uncertainty they create. They are tools in a meteorologist's toolbox. Each one simulates the ongoing change of individual portions of the atmosphere by using current weather and atmospheric observations. Each one, using slightly different formulas from the next, gives a rough projection of the future. However, the farther into the future we go, the further we separate from reality. Better or more weather data going into these models gives better results. So to get the most up-to-date weather data of a hurricane or a tropical cyclone, we gotta fly right into it. Or rather, the hurricane hunters do. There are several groups of experienced pilots that fly directly into tropical cyclones to gather real-time weather data. The data collected from hurricane hunters significantly improves forecast track accuracy as well as a storm's intensity forecast, simply because better data means better forecasts, and better forecasts mean better communication. A storm's impacts are way better understood if uncertainty doesn't also have to be communicated. Take the forecast cone, for example. The cone from the National Hurricane Center provides the forecast path of the center of a tropical cyclone. But at each point in time, it includes 2/3 of historical forecast errors from the past 5 years. So not only is it an official forecast, but it's also a forecast of the unknown or of uncertainty. Notice the farther in time on the forecast, the wider the cone becomes because we're separating further from reality.
Using the cone without layering some form of a hazard on top of it, be it the wind or the storm surge or the rain, is incredibly misleading. People who view the cone as an impact graphic or an impact threat aren't seeing the full picture.
The difficulty now is that society always wants more, and a 5-day forecast isn't enough. How to effectively communicate a potential storm's impact beyond 5 days is a big hurdle the National Hurricane Center faces, but it's a challenge that's best endured with preparation. Steve Fendero, 10 on your side.
Thanks, Steve, but we still have much more ahead in this hurricane season special. Our area has dodged big storms, but it hasn't always been that way. We have a look back. And how climate change has been playing a part in how tropical systems affect us and what we could see in the future. Stay with us. It's a storm that if you were around here in 2003, you'll never forget. Hurricane Isabel caused widespread damage and left hundreds of thousands of people without power for days and even weeks. It was also the last direct hit by a tropical system in Hampton Roads and the Outer Banks. Many people say we're overdue. Chief Meteorologist Emeritus Don Slater has been with 10 on your side for more than 40 years. He's seen a lot of storms, and he also has concerns about the future and climate change.
Our perception of hurricanes is greatly influenced by what we've seen and heard from more recent hurricanes. There was Donna in 1960, Hazel in 1954. 1985's Hurricane Gloria. Bonnie in 1998 was the strongest in 38 years. Floyd was an absolute catastrophe in 1999, which brought a 500-year flood to the town of Franklin, Virginia. In 2003, Isabel was certainly the most memorable storm in 70 years.
A portion of a landmark pier washed away.
Irene in 2011 was another big rainmaker.
I have passed perpendicular.
The biggest hurricane of the century was one that our grandparents and great-grandparents endured, an unnamed storm in late August of 1933. But our history goes back 400 or so years, and there are written accounts of hurricanes far stronger than anything we've seen in the past 100 or so years. A few hurricanes have actually carved out the shape of our coastline. Most of us have traveled, for example, the northern part of the Outer Banks, and of course the northern part of Hatteras Island. And we've seen signs denoting Pea Island and the Body Island Lighthouse. Those are long since closed up, and now it's all one contiguous island, of course, the northern part of Hatteras Island, all the way northward to Oregon Inlet. Farther north toward the Currituck County portion of the northern Outer Banks, South Inlet, near what is now Southern Shores, was opened and closed by hurricanes centuries ago. Probably one of the most powerful hurricanes in Virginia's recorded history was in late August of 1667. For 24 hours, the wind raged and the tide rose as high as 12 feet. This same hurricane greatly widened the Lynnhaven River system in Virginia Beach. 82 years later, a hurricane in 1749 raised the Chesapeake Bay by 15 feet. And together with another one in 1806, Willoughby Spit was formed. From these past storms, we know that these strongest storms were probably Category 2s, about as strong as a storm could get this far north in terms of latitude. But the ultimate fact that we can take away from these past storms is storms of this strength have happened before, and with that, they can and someday will happen again. So that's a lot of what we know from the past, but knowledge and technology have also allowed us a peek into the future. Now, climate change has long predicted that hurricanes could be rainier, think Hurricane Helene, but also much more subject to rapid intensification. With that in mind, Hurricane Milton, October 7th of last season, provides an excellent example of rapid intensification. Milton strengthened from 90 miles an hour at 2 o'clock in the morning to 160 at 1 p.m., then to an astonishing 180 miles per hour at 6 p.m. Now, after October 7th, it encountered a lot of wind shear, thankfully, decreasing its intensity as it made its way eastward. But what caused this rapid intensification? For years, meteorologists and climatologists have been debating the evidence as to whether climate change could indeed be the culprit. Hurricanes thrive on steam heat. Water temperatures must be at least 80 degrees to sustain a hurricane. Of course, sunlight drives that heating of ocean waters. And as one would expect, the top layer of water is heated first and most. But there's another factor that self-regulates hurricane intensification, and that's obviously a lot of wind and water turbulence, which leads to upwelling of cooler waters from below. Thus, any hurricane, in essence, tends to kill itself off. With climate change, the top layer of water is warmer than usual. But there's another factor. The lower depths are warmer, too. With those lower depths being warmer, upwelling of cooler water is far less effective at moderating hurricane strength. So hurricane intensification becomes just explosive. So can the rapid intensification in the case of Milton be attributed to climate change? The answer is a definitive yes. Water temperatures are indeed warmer, but more importantly, those water temperatures are warmer to a greater depth.
Thanks, Don. Still to come on our Tracking the Tropics special. It's a place many of us love, but the beach can quickly turn from a friend to an enemy when bad weather threatens. And I'll have a look at what we're thinking when it comes to the season for Hampton Roads. Stick around. We're back after the break. Many of us enjoy the beach from time to time during the summer. It's easy because it's right here, but there are times when a storm's wrath can take away the shoreline much quicker than it formed. Meteorologist Brian Michigan has a look at the dangers of beach erosion during hurricane season.
The water. Mother Nature's most destructive force. Whether a storm is on its way to Hampton Roads or tracking hundreds of miles out to sea, large waves in our proximity to major bodies of water make the Virginia and North Carolina coast prone to erosion on a daily basis. The most common form of erosion in our area is beach erosion, which is caused by the daily rise and fall of our tides and strong wave action. This daily interaction between the ocean and the sand can break down and wash away sediment, which can shorten the beach. In order to fight back against Mother Nature, millions of dollars are spent each year for beach replenishment efforts like sand dredging to restore the sand which eroded away during the previous winter season. However, this is just a temporary solution, as beach erosion will always continue after dredging is complete, leaving coastal communities vulnerable as hurricane season arrives. This is because as the beach shortens, our dune systems, which protect us from storm surge, can become more susceptible to damage. Let's put this into perspective. If the dunes become compromised during these tropical systems, then there's nothing stopping all that water from the ocean from spilling over these dune systems and into our coastal neighborhoods, which can cause damage during tropical systems. Let's start with just a couple inches of water over normally dry ground. It's at this height we could start to see water seeping into our garages or even our crawl spaces. Let's go a little bit higher than that now. 3 feet of storm surge, right around that. That's when we could start to get water into the first level of your homes, depending on your home's elevation and its proximity to the coastline. It's at this height you can also start to get water that fills into your cars that you may leave outside during a storm. Let's go a little bit higher now, 6 feet, roughly the height of me. It's at this height where we start to get water inundating the entire first floor of your home, and before this happens, you're going to want to seek shelter in higher ground. Now at 10 feet of storm surge, that's where we can really start to see problems across entire coastal communities as major damage can start to occur.
Officials say this area suffered 10 years of beach erosion in one day.
These hurricanes, when they hit totally different. They come in at a different angle of approach. The winds aren't the same direction when they're piling up the water in the bay. And so you can get flooding in areas that people have never seen salt water before.
This could all sound pretty scary, but we still have some time, and the best thing you can do is to prepare, not just by knowing your evacuation route if a storm happens to be coming our way, but also knowing if you live in a flood-prone area. By knowing this, you can get your insurance coverage up to date ahead of time and save yourself a whole lot of stress later down the road, and focus all your energy into the forecast and emergency management officials the next time a storm is coming our way. I'm meteorologist Brian Michigan, 10 on your side.
Thanks, Brian. Next on Tracking the Tropics, that all-important hurricane forecast, what we're thinking the impact will be on Hampton Roads and across the East Coast, and what you need to do now or anytime during the season to be ready for anything the tropics throws our way. More to come. Stick around. Welcome back. We've shown you what we watch during hurricane season, how we look at the history of storms, our own region, all in our forecasting. But when we want to know how active a season is going to be, we have to look for a few ingredients. And that's why we're here, the beach. This is the farthest east we can go. Predicting the number of storms is a difficult task, but with the use of satellites, we can remote sense conditions over the Atlantic Ocean and the Gulf. They can track dust from Africa, water temperatures, and other conditions. When we look at the Atlantic Basin for how many storms we see in a season, on average that's 14 named storms. Of those, 7 are hurricanes and 3 are major hurricanes. As we go throughout the season, where do they track? We have to look for those areas of high pressure. If that area of high pressure over Bermuda is really strong, really large, these storms can track more into the Gulf. If it's a little weaker or it shifts closer to Europe, then these storms can stay along our coast or maybe be like fish storms and they stay out to sea and they don't bother us. But when we look at the season as a whole, how many storms are we going to get? That's the big question. If we're in a La Nina pattern like last year, we get more than normal. If we're in an El Nino pattern, that's when the water is warmer, closer to the South American continent. For us, that would mean fewer storms because of higher amounts of wind shear. This year, we're in neither. We're not in a La Nina, we're not in an El Nino, we're neutral, so we'll probably see closer to the average. But to get better prepared, let's go to the National Hurricane Center.
I can tell you one thing with great certainty. I'm going to prepare just like I do every year, and it sounds cliche, I know, but I assure you there's going to be a Saturday in my future where I'm preparing, including firing up and testing the generator, probably scaring my neighbors pretty badly, to get ready for season. So I'm going to treat this season just like every other one.
We showed you how we prepare for hurricane season, but how do you prepare your family and your home? Here again is meteorologist Jeremy Wheeler.
It's very important to have a plan and have things ready before a storm hits. Here are some tips for you and your family. Long before the storm arrives, you'll want to prepare and pack your important legal documents. These can include the deed to your home, birth certificates, insurance papers, and health information like prescriptions. Put them in a waterproof container that you can either take with you or keep safe. Next, you'll want to gas up or charge your vehicle. Also, be sure to charge your phones and mobile devices. These will likely be your sources of information. You may have to make a reservation somewhere. Make sure it fits your family's needs. Plan ahead for any pets that you may have. Also plan for any elderly or young kids. The next big step is to prepare your hurricane kits. These should include a good-sized medical kit, enough water to drink and use for a while. That's about 1 gallon per person per day. About 3 to 5 days is the rule of thumb on that. Canned foods, these include meats, fish, vegetables, and peanut butter. Food packs that contain dried foods are good as well. A can opener, not electric, flashlights with plenty of batteries, appropriate toiletries and hygiene products, and also any special food and medicines you or your family and your pets may need. Portable chargers are now a must, so don't forget those. These are just some ways that can prepare for the storm. There are even more tips on our hurricane guide on wavy.com.
Thanks, Jeremy. And as we know, all it takes is one storm for this season to be a big deal for us. And that's why we are here on your side to keep you informed. For the entire Super Doppler 10 weather team, I'm Chief Meteorologist Jeff Edmondson. Thanks for watching.